All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. I know there are a few other sessions in parallel that are probably just as interesting or maybe even more, so I appreciate your being here. My name is Reuven Harrisson. I'm a co-founder and CTO at Tufin Technologies. We are a security policy company. In 2 words, we manage security policies in hybrid environments, including traditional networks like firewalls and routers, but also cloud, and more recently Kubernetes as well, so microservices. This is my private Twitter. You're welcome to follow me or you just even see what I'm doing there. Some of it is work related, some of it is private. But okay, let's get started. First of all, this session is about DevOps and security and the relationship between the two and how you can potentially do some better security as part of your DevOps automation. It's challenging. This session is going to mix concepts from the DevOps world, from the dev world, and from the security world. I'm pretty sure not everyone in the room has the full background, so some of you may think that some of the slides are boring or interesting, but please bear with me. But first, I'd like to just see who is who. So, if you're a DevOps person, please raise your hand. Whoa. Developers, raise your hands. Okay, I'd say like maybe 1/5 are developers. Almost everyone is DevOps. How about security? Has anybody here done security? Okay, like 5 or 6 people. Excellent. That's a good start. All right, so DevOps. Does everybody here know what DevOps is? Well, you do DevOps, but I'm not sure that you actually ever thought about the concept. We'll talk about that in a moment. And security, we have at least 6 people here who have done security. And the question is, why? Why mix DevOps and security, right? Well, that's pretty much the topic of my presentation today. Okay, what is DevOps? So a lot of young people in the audience, not everyone, but younger than me at least. So people who are doing DevOps may not know the origins of DevOps. So when I was young, there was a very different world. The people here that are at my age would know this. You had silos. You had the dev silo, you had, or the app, someone it was called, the servers, the networking, the security, and they would not talk to each other. They would throw things over the fence, right? So you would deploy a server and throw it over the fence for the networking team. Then get the cabling done, throw it over the fence for the security team. And the dev was somewhere else, and they wouldn't really communicate with each other. So the dev would write their application very quickly, and then it would take 6 months to get deployed, right? That's the old world. And then some guy in Belgium, what's his name? Does anybody know? Victor something, right? He came up with the concept of DevOps, applying the concepts of dev to operations. So automate the operations and speed things up, and also shared responsibility, right? We're no longer separated silos, we're one team that works together. So this is pretty much the origin of DevOps in a nutshell, but today DevOps has evolved. Today DevOps is not the same as it was 5 or 10 years ago. Today, a lot of people are born DevOps, a lot of companies they know nothing else, and I think today it's one of these things. So, if you think DevOps is primarily number 1, raise your hand. If that's what you're doing, okay? Managing the CI/CD pipeline. Jenkins, Travis, Circle CI. Okay, a few people. How about managing the dev environments, setting up environments for the developers? Who's doing that? Okay, a little bit more, I think. What about number 3? Who's operating the runtime? SREs? Okay, site reliability engineers in the language of Google. And is anybody doing security? I think probably the same people that we had before. Anybody have different definitions for DevOps? Something that I missed maybe? Okay, don't be shy if you think about it later. Okay, security, the dark world, right? It's black slide. So in security, we assume that you're always under attack. And if you don't believe me, just set up a VM in AWS and don't put a security group on it. Okay, and look what happens. Within a few minutes, you'll see that I'm onto something here. Also, assume that you're already compromised. In your environments, there is already malware. Okay, if you think there isn't, you can very easily find out. So it's just a question of how much is at risk. Okay, if you're small, like maybe you have your website, you're selling, I don't know, towels for kitchens. Maybe you're not selling so many Tel, so it's not a big deal. So, okay, you get hacked. You bring it back online the next day, it's fine. But if you have a lot of user data and you have a reputation, for example, we're a security company. If we get hacked, it's very bad for our reputation. It's worse than a Tel company, right? How about revenue? If your service is deployed in the cloud and you get hacked, you're going to have downtime, you're going to lose revenue. Or the entire business. I think a lot of people probably know the story about 3 years ago. A startup got hacked. There was a request to pay the hackers money, so ransom. They didn't pay the money. The hackers started killing their machines. They killed the entire, data center, and the company closed down. They lost everything. So that's an extreme case, but it can happen as well. So the question is to what extent you are aware of these threats. These threats are definitely there, but it's about you and how big is the threat and how big are you aware of it. Okay, and now the big question, what has DevOps got to security? So a few ideas here. Developers hate security. Would anybody agree with this? You don't have to, but yeah, one guy at least agrees, yeah. Okay. Maybe some other people agree but don't want to raise their hand. Security is boring. Anyone? Well, you're here in this session, so maybe you have some interest in security. Security slows down development. Anybody agree with that? Yeah, a lot of people. Good. You have to be a security expert to do security. Anybody agrees with that? Yeah. Some people are saying no, but I didn't ask if you don't agree. I asked if you do agree. And DevSecOps. Who's heard of DevSecOps? The Gartner thing. Do you think it's a real thing? Okay. So I'm going to say all of these are wrong, okay? Controversial. And we can talk about it. If you still don't agree with me at the end of the lecture, we can have a fight outside. Okay, great. So, just before we go into details, and I promise there will be technical detail here, we also have a demo. A few benefits of integrating security into DevOps. First, it improves your security, so resilience to cyber attacks. And secondly, it increases agility. So for those of you who think that security will slow down DevOps, maybe it does today, but if you do it properly in an automated way, it not only will not slow you down, it will speed you up. And you can get rid of these meetings. This down here, for those in the back, says, frankly, I don't know why I call this meeting. It's a typical meeting between developers and security teams, right? Spend 3 hours, they ask you, why did you open port 443? You try to explain that's how web servers work. Okay, anyway. And the last advantage is your CISO. This is your CISO before you integrate security and DevOps, and this is after, right? Great. So you want to do that. Who knows what it is? What this is? What's this? Yes, it appears in Git, and the official name is badges, correct? Very correct. Does anybody use code coverage, this badge? Yeah, okay. For those of you who don't know, this measures the coverage of your tests as a percentage of your code base. So a good practice is to have close to 100%. This is actually quite good, that's why it's green. So this is an indicator, and this means that your last build passed in Jenkins or whatever. This is badges, right? You can stick them in your Git and your GitHub repositories. And basically, they're about gamification. So you've probably heard of gamification. This is a quote from a book that I'm reading now. There is always a winner when there is a ranking, right? So as soon as you put this in front of a developer, he's in a competition. And that's good, because he's going to want to improve his code coverage, and he's going to want his builds to pass. So gamification is the first point that I'm going to make today about security. You want to gamify security, okay? Security is part of your quality as a developer, maybe also as a DevOps person. Like CodeCov, it's the same. You want to show it to the developer or to the owner, right? To the stakeholder. It could be developer, DevOps person, whoever is managing an infrastructure or part of your application. A few examples of gamifications: you can provide points to developers, badges like we just saw, gauges with levels, leaderboards, challenges. Here's an example. I don't know if this is a challenge or what this is Italian Waze. Okay, have you ever seen Waze in Italian? This is what it looks like. And this is, I think it's from LinkedIn or something like that. So add your position, add your education. So it encourages you to play the game, right? And if you apply the same to security, you're going to get developers more interested in securing their infrastructure. But let's see a real example. This is a security badge. This is a security badge here. It says security and the score is F, like an American score. Failed, really bad. This is something that one of our products can provide within a repository. And it starts giving the developer a sense of how well he's doing, right? But it's more than just a badge. You can actually click that and it will take you to a page that provides details. And this is very important. If you just provide F, people are not going to understand what you're talking about. But if you give them the background, not only you allow them to correct it, but also you're teaching them, right? So people who see why they got an F, they see in this case it's related to vulnerabilities in their code, they start to be aware of vulnerabilities and they start to think in these terms when they write code. So it's also an educational benefit. Okay, let's talk about security for a moment. Let's put gamification aside. Let's talk about security. So I'm going to provide 6 fundamental aspects of security. Security is a very wide concept. And very complex as well, but 6 examples here that I think are fundamental. The first 3, I actually didn't provide the source here, but they're from a guy from Uber that I met last week in KubeCon. And these were his first 3. So the first one is RBAC, role-based access control for everything, right? Examples. Who can give me an example of what needs to be locked down with role-based access control? I'll give the first one if you can. AWS, right. All of your services, all of your VMs, your administration, everything in AWS needs to be locked down with RBAC. What's it called in AWS? IAM policies, correct. Another example. Okay, who has access to your GitHub repository? Who can manage GitHub? RBAC, right? Okay. Who has access to your machines, your developer machines, your PCs? Okay. Everything needs to be locked down with RBAC, okay? And you want an audit trail. This is maybe not for developers and not for DevOps, maybe for the security guys, but every time somebody accesses something, there needs to be a log about that. So you can go back and do forensics if something goes wrong. Okay, second, fundamental, network security. Who can talk to who? It doesn't have to be an IP address. It can be a VM, it can be a cloud service, it can be a microservice, it can be data, right, an S3 bucket, it can be anything. You want to be able to restrict who is talking to, and you want to minimize the interactions, the potential interactions using policies. So sometimes you can do that with IAM policies, with RBAC. Sometimes you'll do that with security groups, or with firewalls, or with anything, right? But lock things down. The problem with this point here is that people don't know what the policies are. A lot of time it's guesswork, and a lot of time that guesswork is not very secure. Okay. Third bullet, secrets and certificates only when they are needed. This is the third point from the guy from Uber. You need to inject your secrets and your certificates into the right points in the pipeline, right? So you put your secrets in Jenkins. Hopefully they're not clear text, right? And they should be only at the very local place that needs to use them, nowhere else, because hackers are going to try to get them, right? Fourth point, end-to-end encryption everywhere, in transit and in rest. Encrypt your data in transit and in rest. And there's a side note here, don't let developers do it. Okay, traditionally most of encryption is done by developers. They will set up a web server in Java or whatever, right? And they'll apply some Java classes to provide HTTPS or TLS, whatever. It's not a very good idea. I mean, it's better than nothing, but ideally you want that to be part of your infrastructure. So as an example, if you've heard of Istio, who's heard of Istio? Okay, Istio is service mesh. It's kind of framework that sits around your Kubernetes microservices with sidecars. Istio can provide mutual TLS. So now you don't have to provide security inside the app, you can delegate it to Istio. And then you get certificate authority, you get revocation lists, you get a lot of advantages that developers don't necessarily know how to do. Okay, AppSec, I think a lot of people here are probably doing AppSec because apps, AppSec. So I think this is overrated because a lot of developers think that if they do this, then they're covered because they know how to do this. And there are probably 50 solutions in the market to scan your applications for vulnerabilities. Some free, some commercial. So everyone does AppSec, but it's not enough. It's good, it's important, but it's not enough. Vulnerability scans for your code, static scans, dependencies, open source vulnerabilities, so forth. And the last point is monitoring, which goes a little bit beyond our scope today, monitoring and alerts on abnormal behavior, okay? Great. So if you want to start doing some security, consider these bullets as starting points. It's a lot of work, by the way. This is not something that you can do in one day. So keep in mind it's an ongoing process. Okay. This is not a product. This is something that our UX guy developed in 5 minutes. Maybe you can start measuring some of these things and gamify them. So have a dashboard, start getting some numbers around this. How much of your infrastructure is protected with RBAC? Develop some metrics and start to think about it in a high-level way like this. Okay. One last point about gamification. You can play gamification over time, so you get a trend. So how is my project doing over time, right? Here, the blue one is kind of generally going up. Or you can play stakeholders against each other. So project 1 versus project 2. Developer 1 versus developer 2. Container 1 versus container 2. So both of these will encourage people to do more security. Okay, too much information. Okay, this is a big problem in security. There is too much information. And the problem is, like the story, I guess most people know the story. The boy who shouted wolf the first time, then everyone came to help him. It turns out he was just making up a story because he was bored. The second time, third time nobody came. It was actually the real wolf, right? So this is the wolf story. And in security, you have too many alerts, too many vulnerabilities. Nobody is going to do anything about them. They're just going to sit there. So how can you deal with that? You can reduce the noise. So you can prioritize based on some logic that I will explain in a moment. You can filter, and you can summarize. You don't necessarily have to see all the details. Just give, like, how many vulnerabilities do you have? 100, 1,000, 10,000? Start, and then like, give it a color, right? Red, yellow, or green. Start there. A couple of examples of how to prioritize and filter. Vulnerability that has an exploit. Most vulnerabilities don't have exploits on the market. So hackers, 90% of the hackers can't do anything with them because most hackers are script kiddies. They don't know how to actually hack. They only know how to use someone else's hacks. So if there's an exploit on the market, you definitely want to prioritize that vulnerability over something that doesn't have an exploit. How can you know if there is an exploit or not? You need a security expert. Okay, this is something that is beyond the scope of today's session. But that information does exist. RBAC, we discussed. Start with the system. Protect your infrastructure before you protect the app, right? This here, PAM, is privileged access management, like CyberArk, for example. There are also solutions, open source solutions. Basically, you want to protect the root passwords. Okay, that's it in an essence. The root passwords have a precedence over the user passwords. That's what this is about. Okay, few more ideas about security. Everything has code. All right, so applications are code, right? Your Java or your Python or your Go is code, and you can perform static code analysis. You can analyze the dependencies for vulnerabilities. You can do a lot of stuff based on that. You can track it because it's in GitHub, who changed. It gives you a lot of power, right? That's an audit trail. But your infrastructure also has to be code, okay? Everything has to be code. Infrastructure as code, I'm sure you've heard the term. You want all of your infrastructure to be defined in files. It allows you to ensure that your configurations are secure before you deploy them. If you're using Terraform or CloudFormation or something like that, or Ansible. And also, it allows you to have an audit trail. Okay, who changed what? It allows you to basically manage things. So also, we'll talk about in a moment about immutable infrastructure. So it's also related to that. And security policies that are traditionally done in Word documents by security managers that nobody ever reads except for auditors, and they don't read them either, they just pretend to read them. Security policies should be code as well, right? Nobody needs to read them, they should be automated. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And now, if you do all of this, you have a very nice audit trail out of the box. You don't need extra tools for that. Who's heard this term? Raise your hand. Immutable. Okay, most people, great. So it's not very new, but it's very important. If you have a problem in your security problem or some other problem in your environment, you can very easily redeploy that environment from code very quickly. It means that your infrastructure is not changing after you deploy it. That's the significance of this. You deploy a container or a cluster or an environment, and you don't SSH into that environment and change it. That should never happen. You should never SSH into your environments. You should deploy environments. If you want to change them, decommission them and redeploy them. That's immutable infrastructure. And again, that enables you to get rid of a problem. So somebody's got into your container, you see some suspicious activity there, just get rid of that container and redeploy it. It takes like half a second to do that. Okay, so you've gotten rid of the SSH, the malicious SSH session into your container, and you restart. Very easy. Okay, containers, yeah. But what about data, right? Data is by definition not immutable, right? So how can we deal with data? You can't get rid of the data and redeploy the data, right? It's your user data. It's also big data. It's not so fast to deploy. So let's think about data for a moment. Does anybody have an idea how to make data more secure? Kind of the same concept of immutable infrastructure? Okay, that's a tricky one. Data is tricky. So you can write procedures like we need to back up our data once a week, and we need to test that the backup works once a month. We need to do a disaster recovery drill once a year, whatever, right? But these procedures are very boring and nobody reads them. And also the person that needs to do the drills, you need to rely on this person that he actually does them properly, right? So a lot of challenges here. So let's try to automate that, okay? You can test, you can write tests for your data and test them very frequently. Okay, you can also do continuous security if you write the test automatically. So you're not relying on that person to do them manually anymore. You can do them every build in your CI, and also now your procedures are code. They're not Word documents anymore. So your auditors are very happy. They ask you for your procedures. You just give them access, read-only access to your repository, and now they're happy, right? And also, if you automate everything, you can also measure it, right? You can get some output from your tests and start to put them on charts and badges and things like that. So here is an example, the people in the back might not be able to see, of an automated test that we actually perform in Circle CI in this case. So Tufin Orca is, I'll explain it because nobody can read this. It's basically building a Docker image and it's scanning it, right? I think a lot of people here are doing it with different solutions. So scan the Docker image before it goes out to production. This is actually the slide that I was going to show about data. So my slides are slightly out of order. So backups, right? You wanna check the backups, or you want to use a service to do that. You want to perform a periodical drill, and you want a procedure. Does this sound right to you? Is this the right way to handle data backups? So I'm going to say no. Okay, I'm going to say there are two problems here. The first problem is the periodical drill. If you see something periodical, that's the warning. That's a red light flashing there. Periodical is not good. DevOps is continuous. It's every build. It's not periodical. Right? Periodical is not a good way to do security. And also the procedures. The procedures should be Java procedures, not Word procedures, right? So you want to automate this. So let's see how we can automate this. Okay, let's talk about test automation. Everyone probably knows these, right? Unit testing, etc. And then let's add security tests, okay? This is pretty much the general idea of my session today. Let's automate security as part of the CI/CD. So now, I'm going to show you a very quick demo of an automation in the CI of a certain aspect of security. Again, you can automate vulnerability scans, you can automate many other things as part of your security, as part of your CI/CD. You can check configurations against policies and baselines. But I'm going to show you a unique demo here, which we've developed as part of our solutions as well. Okay, so thanks, Effie. This is Tufin Orca, which is, in a nutshell, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. It monitors your microservice applications on Kubernetes, okay? So here you can see all the microservices and how they're intercommunicating, and also services that are outside of the cluster. So egress. Egress traffic means traffic that's coming out and going to the cloud. Okay, so we have services, and now you can see that Orca discovers the connections, and you can actually get them as in this kind of drop down. Okay, so here, for example, you can see that this service, Lomé, is going to accounts. This is google.com, I know that. This is PubSub on Google. And this is two services that are internally communicating. So it discovers the connections, right? Okay, big deal. A lot of people here know how to discover connections between services, right? But what we do with this is security automation. Okay, we are using Istio also to do encryption, but let's focus on the discovery here. Effie, can you move to Circle CI now? Yep. So Circle CI, for those of you who are not familiar, is Jenkins in the cloud. One of the options of Jenkins, it's not Jenkins, but it's a CI system in the cloud as a service. We use that. And here is a build that was triggered as a result of us committing something into a branch, okay? So a developer is creating a new feature, and as part of the new feature, he submits some code, and then we get the typical pipeline, which builds the environment, and then we have some special steps here. So this step here is reset policy. So the reset policy goes to Orca with a RESTful API and resets all the connections for that application. Okay, so we create a blank baseline. And then we run the tests, the integration tests. Effie, can you open the test just so we see? Yeah. Typical test, nothing special. It's written in Go. Okay, so hopefully all of our tests passed. And then my point is you also want to run security tests, right? So the security tests that we run here, and this is just one example, you can do many other things in the pipeline. Here, we call an API to Orca, which has been observing the cluster during our integration tests, and we retrieve a list of all the connections that were discovered in the application. So now, what is the value of this? The value is that we've created a baseline of good behavior of the application. Okay, this is the application, how the application is supposed to work. It could be in a branch, it could be actually in the staging environment, or it could even be in production. But if you do it in a branch, there's probably very little chances of malware being in there. The connections you see are the good connections, and you can also review them. And then the last thing that we do is we commit this policy, or it's not a policy yet, it's just a list of connections. We commit it back to the repo in GitHub. So this is our branch, gamifications. It's a new feature on our product. And let's take a look at the changes on the policy file. Yeah, so we have a new connection that was discovered compared to the previous connection. So now we see that this microservice, Lighthouse, is talking to google.com, and it was automatically added to our baseline. So why is all this good? Because now we can apply this in production. Now we can say, let's enforce this policy in production. And any connection that is seen in production which is not whitelisted here is either going to be blocked or creating an alert, or both. Right? So we've created a whitelist and alerts about abnormal behavior. So this is very, very useful for security, because one of the first things hackers will do if they manage to get into your environment, and they will, is first of all, go to the cloud or to their server in the cloud to download some tools that they need, Netcat or Nmap or things like that. And then do whatever they do inside of your environment. Then once they've gotten the data they're looking for, if it's data, they'll upload it back to their server in the cloud. So you have at least 2 connections to the cloud. And if you can catch these connections, you've reduced the risk of a hack. Okay, so again, that was just an example. You can do many other things, many other types of security automation in the pipeline. Question?
How much time does it take to run this?
Very good question. Very good. And that's the reason that I didn't show the real demo today, because it takes 4 minutes. I didn't want everyone here to wait 4 minutes while I run the tests. It's a good point because we want our CI to finish very quickly, right? So you have different options. You can run a subset of the test, right? You can distribute the tests. You can run them once a day, not every build. You have options there, but it's a very good point. You wanna be agile with your builds. Okay. Fine. Let's just go over this again. So this is what we saw. We learned the application behavior during tests. We automatically defined the policy, and you can review it manually, but ideally you also want to review it automatically. So you want to have a policy in code, do the comparison versus the policy. Do you allow your application to connect to the cloud? Yes or no? That's a policy. Do you allow it to connect to google.com? Yes or no? That's a policy. Just compare it, and if it's okay, then promote it to merge it with master or promote it to production, whatever you're doing, right? This is almost the last slide here. So about culture. So again, people here who have been doing DevOps, maybe younger people who don't really know the previous world, may not have this problem. But a lot of people, I'm sure here, are coming from larger enterprises or more conservative environments, and they may not be fully familiar with the DevOps culture. Now, since most of you are doing DevOps, you're probably familiar, but your peers may not be familiar. Your security managers may still be thinking in the old-fashioned way, which is we're going to have a weekly review, or we're going to review the application before it goes to production, or we're going to come in and ask you to fill out forms about how is your encryption implemented. All of these things are things of the past. And you should know, you should be able to guide them about how security is done in the DevOps world, okay? It's about shared responsibility. It's not about developer here and security guy here. You have to put them in the same room. Ask them to join you in your office for a week, okay? So they get the gist of automation. The security teams need to understand the DevOps culture more than the other way around, okay? That's, you know, sometimes we want to be nice to everyone, so we say, you guys need to understand each other. No. The security guys need to understand the DevOps culture, not the other way around. It will help if you understand the security people too, because you'll understand their objections, why they want to control things, and why they want to do these lengthy reviews. But ideally, you want to educate them, and I think they want to learn as well. It's about trust, collaboration, and automation. Everything needs to be automated. If you need to remember one thing from my presentation today, security must be automated. That's it. And also another practice that we've seen in our larger enterprise customers, let's say that you have 20 development teams and a small security team that manages security for the enterprise. What they do is they assign one security owner in each dev team. This person is not necessarily a security expert, but he owns security for that product or that service. And this person works with the team, so he's part of the team, but he also collaborates with the security managers, the security teams. So he gets training and he reports to them. That creates a bridge of trust. Okay, summary, last slide. If you can gamify some of your security metrics, that's going to help the developers do better security. If you understand the security fundamentals, start with them. There's a lot of different types of security. You can't do all of it, not in the first day, not in the first week. Pick one fundamental aspect, whether it's secret management or RBAC or network security, and start with that. Reduce noise. There is too much noise in the security world, too many alerts, too many vulnerabilities, and people will end up ignoring them. Everything should be code. Okay, your code should be code, your infrastructure should be code, and your policy should be code. By the way, if you haven't heard of Open Policy Agent, OPA, take a look at that. You can write policies as code. You have a line in there. You can run out of battery. Immutable infrastructure, okay. Use containers, use Kubernetes, maybe use serverless as well. Actually, the less infrastructure you have, the better you are, because someone else is taking care of the infrastructure, right? Doesn't mean that it's perfect, you still need policy. But if you can provide responsibility to the cloud owner, then you don't have to do it yourself. Again, you still need your policies. Don't rely on the cloud provider for everything. And finally, automate security in the pipeline. Okay, again, one takeaway, if you could only remember one thing, remember this one. All right, thank you very much. Q&A, we have about 3 minutes. Let's take one question here.
I'd like to hear a little bit about how enforcement and mitigation are being handled, because we've only heard about how to prepare an environment to be more secured.
Enforcement and mitigation. Okay, I'm not sure I can answer that question right away. But enforcement, so it has a lot of... Okay, mitigation, or like incident response, things like that. I haven't talked about it, you're right. It's something that I completely ignored. Once you have an incident or suspicious activity, you need to start a playbook of how to respond to this incident. There are solutions like SOAR, SOAR solutions, that have playbooks that you can define in advance, so you're not like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? You know, based on the incident, you already have a reaction which is properly defined. You automate it as well. Okay, SOAR solutions, look up SOAR, they automate the response. I think we're done. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.